Netanyahu admits that he actually stopped the two-state solution. So when they talk about things like, well, they were offered a state and they didn't take it, it's the Palestinians' fault. Well, Netanyahu admits he was never going to allow them one to begin with. It was all a facade. And really what this showcases is October 7th is going to mark a new era for the U.S. reputation around the world, U.S. Foreign policy. It's going to mark the beginning of the end of American influence because it's increasingly obvious that the U.S. has lost all control and influence over Israel. Let me show you this. This is from Axios. This is inside the U.S.-Palestinian talks about post-war Gaza. You've got the Biden admin. You've got a bunch of different officials who've been headed over to the West Bank, from Jake Sullivan there in the photographs. You've also had Anthony Blinken. All of these people going over there trying to figure things out, trying to calm the Israelis down and say, you need to take a beat because it's not looking so good. You're killing a lot of people. And meeting with Abbas, you've got there Jake Sullivan meeting with Abbas in the West Bank, trying to come to some sort of day after Hamas situation for Gaza. What is Gaza going to look like the day after Hamas? The Americans want the Palestinian Authority, that's Abbas, who's, by the way, 87 years old, so he's quite up there in age. They want him and the people who follow him. He's in charge of the West Bank. They want him to take over Gaza and unite the two governments. That is what the U.S. has been angling for, meeting with Abbas, meeting with the Israelis, saying this is what we got to do. We got to get them all together and give the strip back to the Palestinian Authority. However, the U.S. has admitted that it would be difficult to move forward with resuming the Palestinian Authority's role in Gaza without Israel's consent. And guess what? Israel's not consenting. So the United States is meeting with Abbas, meeting with the Palestinian Authority, meeting with the Israelis, and the Israelis are saying, forget it, not going to happen. The Israeli government currently opposes any return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has turned the issue into a domestic political campaign as the likelihood of an early election increases. So he's up for re-election soon, and he's saying there will be no Palestinian Authority in Gaza. So this is showing the U.S. has completely lost control over the situation. The U.S. has no more influence. The Israelis are doing whatever they want. It is very obvious. The U.S. has urged them to scale back on their indiscriminate bombing. The U.S. has told them we've got to get the Palestinian Authority involved. And Israel has just said, no, thanks for the suggestion, not going to happen. So the U.S. has lost all control, and October 7th is going to mark the beginning of the end of U.S. influence. Also, when you look at what's gone on with Ukraine, for example, and the U.S. saying to Ukraine, we're washing our hands of this, sorry, we're out, we've moved on to Israel. It's going to show that the United States is actually under the control of Israel and not the other way around, that Israel controls itself, that the United States has no influence over Israel, and also at the same time that Israel has so much power that it could cause the United States to abandon previous commitments. Not that I was for them, but nonetheless, it doesn't look good when you make promises to a country saying we're with you to the bitter end, and then suddenly you bail out when another country comes along and says, hey, we need the help more than they do, even though they don't. Israel's not the one being invaded at this moment. When you really break it down on who would actually need the money more, it would be Ukraine. I don't think we should be giving it to anybody, but nonetheless, when it comes to need, it certainly would be Ukraine if you're going to be making the logical argument. So we have lost complete control over the situation. We're losing face around the world. It's not looking good. And Israel's exposing this. They're making us look like clowns, honestly. And here we are still going along like as if, it's just looking crazy. So here's the Times of Israel. Netanyahu reporting that Netanyahu is proud of blocking the two-state solution. So he says in this meeting, he was in a press conference, and he said on Saturday night that he was proud he prevented the establishment of a Palestinian state and took credit for putting the brakes on the Oslo peace process. During a press conference at the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv over the weekend, he also reiterated his opposition to the Palestinian Authority taking control of Gaza after the war with Hamas ends, adding that, quote, among friends, it's important not to foster illusions, alluding to Washington's desire for a revamped Palestinian Authority to take control of the coastal enclave. So he's saying, We shouldn't foster illusions with our friends. So again, just saying, you've lost control. We're not doing what you say. Netanyahu described the Oslo Accords as a fateful mistake and said the results of the little Palestinian state in Gaza, brought about by the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, demonstrated the danger of allowing Palestinian sovereignty in the West Bank. He says, quote, "I'm proud that I prevented the establishment of a Palestinian state because today everybody understands what that Palestine state could have been. Now that we've seen the little Palestinian state in Gaza, everyone understands what would have happened if we would have capitulated to international pressures and enabled a state like that in Judea and Samaria, surrounding Jerusalem and on the outskirts of Tel Aviv." They call the West Bank Judea and Samaria. They call all the region that the Gazans and the Palestinian people take over. That's their term for that region. So he's saying, I'm proud that I prevented the Palestinian state. And yet, so he's saying, look at what they did when they were given one. Well, the Gazans were never given Gaza as an actual state. It was more like a reservation, like an Indian reservation here in the United States, but worse than that. Because at least with these Native American reservations, for one, the people can come and go. They're not stuck on the reservations. They can actually leave the reservations. They can actually vote in elections. They are American citizens, even though they are Native Americans in control of their piece of land. But that's ultimately what we gave them was, what the Israelis, gave, what they helped the United States. I mean, it was all backed by the U.S. at the same time, but they gave them Gaza and they said, here you go, except, by the way, you're not going to control your ports. You're not going to control your airspace. You're not going to control your borders. You're not going to have any control over what comes in and what goes out. You're not going to have control over anything at all. But go ahead and see how you do. Go ahead and see how you do. Let's see if you survive on your own. We're going to pull out of there. We're going to give you no resources. We're not going to allow you to have resources. And we'll see how well you fare. And ultimately, they didn't fare very, very well. That oppression bred radicalization, 100%. And they're pointing at that. This was the plan all along, pointing at that and saying, see, we can't give them a state because look what they do when they have one. Except they failed to tell you they were never given one. And he said that it was for humanitarian reasons that they were, he goes on to say in here, Netanyahu insisted that he had inherited the Oslo Accords and that the decision to bring the PLO from Tunis and plant it in the heart of Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank and in Gaza, was a decision made and implemented before I became prime minister, and one that he always thought was a mistake. He goes on to say the money didn't go to strengthen Hamas, because people were saying, well, but you were having money go to Hamas from Qatar. And he says the money didn't go to strengthen Hamas. It didn't go to the Hamas military system. It went to stop the humanitarian disaster in Gaza and 2 million Gazans pouring onto the border. And who knows with what illnesses and infectious diseases he calls. So he says it was for humanitarian reasons that we allowed Qatar to be sending money into Gaza. But it turns out that's not true, because in March of 2019, he said this. He said anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. He told his Likud party's Knesset members in March of 2019. He said, this is part of our strategy. That's from Haaretz, if we could put that image up there. They reported on this. So again, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas, saying that this is part of the strategy. So the strategy was to strengthen Hamas. The strategy was to get it to where the people would become more radicalized, was to blockade them into this strip, give them nothing, no access to anything, and then bolster their government, which is a very harsh right-wing government, a radical government, and then say, see, we can't give them a state because look what they do. It was all part of the plan. But look at how they are. I mean, the Israelis they say that it's Hamas who's radical. They say that it's Hamas who wants to wipe them off the face of the map, that if they allow them to live, that's what they're going to do. But what about themselves? Here's David Azulai. He's the head of the Metula Council, which is an area in the northern part of Israel. He proposed sending all Gazans to refugee camps in Lebanon and then flattening the whole strip so it becomes an empty museum like Auschwitz. Literally what he said. Here's the Jerusalem Post saying, saying here that he says, quote, he was on a radio station and he was giving an interview and he said, quote, after October 7th, instead of urging people to go south, we should direct them to the beaches. The Navy can transport them to the shores of Lebanon, where there are already sufficient refugee camps. Then a security strip should be established from the sea to the Gaza border fence, completely empty, as a reminder of what was once there. It should resemble the Auschwitz concentration camp, he says. Tell everyone in Gaza to go to the beaches. Navy ships should load the terrorists onto the shores of Lebanon. The entire Gaza Strip should be emptied and leveled flat. Just like in Auschwitz, let it become a museum showcasing the capabilities of the state of Israel and dissuading anyone from living in the Gaza Strip. This is what must be done to give them a visual representation. I don't know if that doesn't sound like a Nazi. I don't know what does. I mean, it sounds just like it, in fact, using even Auschwitz. So you got that guy proposing this. Now, this is because Egypt won't, Egypt has said, we're not going to be involved in your ethnic cleansing campaign. You guys want to repopulate, you want to move all of these 2.2 million people into Egypt. Not going to happen. We're not, for one, who could take 2.2 million refugees? A country like Egypt cannot. And two, then you would win the war. The whole war, the battle that has been fought over the last 100 years has been over the land. And you guys came along and said you wanted a Jewish nation. It's a holy land for all three religions. And yet you guys have come along with these Zionist ideas saying that it's got to be just for Jews. And you're trying to clear out anyone else, Christians and Muslims, from the region. And you want to get them out of there. And if we take them, then we've now aided and abetted you in this situation. So here's, so they say, oh, we're going to turn it into a museum, right? We're going to turn it into a museum, except they're not going to be turning it into a museum. No one's going to allow those white sand beaches to go to waste, would they? So here's an Israeli real estate company already putting out plans for Gaza development. Take a look at these pictures. So those are the destroyed Gaza buildings, and they're saying, well, we could put some new buildings here. Now, I don't know if they did these drawings as to be jerks, just to antagonize the Palestinians, or if they did these drawings because they actually are wanting to sell beachfront property. But there you can see the Gaza Strip, and they've got all these yellow dots of, they're going to have these different communities all throughout the Gaza, all the Gaza Strip. They've even got, look at this, Elite Nova is what this one would be called. It would be a new ultra-Orthodox city. Putting them right on the border because they don't like the ultra-Orthodox because they don't serve in the IDF. So they're like, put them right on the border, make them suffer. So, look, I don't know if they're doing this to antagonize. They're already starting to clear things in the northern part of Gaza. The Israelis clearly are not going to allow the Gazans to return to the north. So anybody that claimed this was not an ethnic cleansing campaign, you have to have some serious blinders on at this point. You'd have to have blinders on at this point to not see that this is clearly, very clearly, and they're making it very well known that this is an ethnic cleansing campaign. You've got the United States scrambling, hustling, trying to get it to where it's not, trying to get it to where the Gazans return to the Gaza Strip and it's under the Palestinian Authority. And what are the Israelis saying to the Americans? No way, not going to happen. We're controlling the whole strip. And we got to get the Palestinians out of here. Make the place like Auschwitz. Put them on boats and take them to Lebanon. Since Egypt won't take them, their new plan is to move them to Lebanon because they could force Lebanon to take them. And that's where they're wanting to move them now. They're Lebanon, and then they're going to start it on the West Bank. They've already said this is going to be, now listen to their words carefully, because Netanyahu has said this is going to be a couple of years long. He has said that this war will last a couple of years. Now think about, why would it last a couple of years when they've already cleared the entire northern part of the Gaza Strip in 60 days? Seems like they're moving pretty fast. Well, they're going to put everybody down the south. They're now bombing the south. There's no safe place in Gaza. They're going to be loading these people up and taking them to boats to Lebanon or somewhere else. And then they're going to start in on the West Bank, and that's going to take a lot longer than Gaza. The West Bank is going to be a lot harder to clear out. It's going to be a lot harder to shove those people into Jordan. And there might be more pushback from the international community. So that's why they're thinking it's going to be a 2-year-long war. But they're thinking 2 years, small investment, all the Palestinians will be gone. Israel will be somehow secure. The argument never made sense. They say, we're surrounded by hostile Arab countries. We're surrounded by. Okay, so then if you get rid of Palestine, you still have hostile Arab countries around you at your border, right? It's just, they're not, your land is expanded. That's what's happened. So, excuse me, allergies lately. So that is what's happening. There's radicals. The United States has lost complete control over the situation. We're now the laughing stock in the world. The world will see that we have lost influence, and it's just going to take time for the U.S. to catch up to the fact that we've lost influence. My guess is 30 years. I would think it's going to take politicians 30 years to let it go and to start looking at the United States and wanting to rebuild our own country and focus on our own country. I think that they're going to, for the next 30 years, keep posturing and thinking that they have some sort of influence and that other countries care. But after what's happened with Ukraine, other countries aren't going to trust us. There's no doubt about that. They shouldn't have to begin with, but certainly not going to now. And now it looks like the country that we helped build and develop and fund has now turned on us and is no longer doing anything that we say. They've grown up and they don't need us, certainly not our advice, and they don't seem to care. And that says something about the United States. All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. We've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you watching. We will be back again with another great show tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to watch us then. Until then, guys, email me your thoughts, kim@kimiverson.com. I love to hear from you. Any ideas you've got for guests or for topics, or if you just want to comment on anything you heard on tonight's show, email me. And we will see you again tomorrow night, guys. Have a great one. Bye-bye.